Welcome to the Heartbreak Chronicles, where every story is a raw reflection of life. Hit that subscribe button to stay tuned, give us a like to show your support, and share this episode with your friends. Don't forget to leave a comment and let us know what you think. Now, let's dive into today's story. My name is Thomas and I am a wine importer. On the Upper East Side of New York, I own a luxury apartment, have a successful career, and a passion for wine. And yet, my heart could never fill that void. My wife, Olivia, is a socialite with a passion for attending charity dinners and art exhibitions. She was beautiful and a favorite of high society. Unfortunately, in her eyes, I seemed to be nothing more than an ornament, an ATM that would provide her with a life of luxury. I remember when we first moved into this apartment, I was still in the midst of a wonderful vision of the future. I handpicked a bottle of 1982 Lafite and wanted to celebrate this momentous occasion with Olivia. However, when I excitedly opened the bottle, Olivia frowned and said, "Honey, you know I'm allergic to red wine. Let's just drink champagne." At that moment, I felt like my enthusiasm was doused. I was sitting alone on my balcony, sipping this treasured bottle of wine, looking out over Manhattan at night, but my heart was filled with despondency. As time passed, Olivia's profligacy alarmed me more and more. She seems to use shopping as a way to unwind, bringing back piles of luxury items every week. I've politely reminded her to stop in moderation, but she just says dismissively, "Honey, you have to realize that it costs money to maintain our social status." What's even more chilling is that Olivia is getting colder and colder towards me. Our interactions were limited to superficial politeness in social situations. And when we got home, she was always busy talking to her friends or planning the next party. It's been a long time since we sat down and had a heart-to-heart like a normal couple. I came home from a wine tasting one night to find Olivia in intimate conversation with a strange man in the living room. When I returned, the man left in a panic, and Olivia said it was just her charity program partner, as if nothing had happened. I couldn't pinpoint exactly what had happened between them, but the feeling of betrayal stuck in my throat. Just when I thought life had hit rock bottom, our daughter Sophia brought even more shocking news. Sophia came back from college that day and approached me in a panic. "Daddy, there's something I have to tell you," she trailed off. I saw Mommy with Uncle Jack." My heart sank. Uncle Jack was a longtime friend and partner in my firm. Sophia continued, "Not only that, but I overheard my mom having inappropriate relationships with several men. Dad, I really don't know what to do." Hearing those words made me feel like my whole world was falling apart. I always thought Olivia was just being cold to me, but I never thought she would betray me like that. At that moment, I finally realized that I couldn't go on living numb like this. I hugged a tearful Sophia and gently reassured her, "Don't worry, baby. Dad will take care of this." That night, I sat alone in my study with a glass of 1961 Latour in my hand. I gazed at the deep red color in my wine glass and contemplated my life. I think of the passionate, life-affirming person I once was for wine. I couldn't help but ask myself, do I really want to keep sinking in such a meaningless marriage? My eyes landed on the book on the shelf, under the Tuscan sun, and an idea suddenly came to me. Maybe it's time to give yourself a fresh start. I decided that I would go in search of that legendary reserve wine and take this opportunity to escape this stifling married life and find myself again. That's how I began to secretly plan my escape. I told Olivia that I was going to Italy to scout out a shipment of rare wines, and that it might take a couple months. She didn't seem to care about it, and just urged me not to forget to bring back some designer bags. Watching her ramble on, I felt a mixture of sadness and a hint of relief. I knew that this would be a journey that would change the course of my life. On the morning of my departure, I took one last look at the luxurious apartment that had once haunted me and gently closed the door. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know that I've finally gotten up the courage and determination to make a difference. This is not only a journey in search of rare wines, but also a journey in search of our true selves. With anticipation of the unknown and some trepidation, I stepped on a plane to Tuscany, Italy. At the moment the plane took off, it was as if I heard the gears of fate begin to turn. I know that what awaits me will be a journey full of surprises, challenges, and self-discovery. And that, in a nutshell, is the true meaning of life that I've been searching for. When I set foot on Italian soil, it was as if my whole being was much lighter. The Tuscan sun gently caressed my face, and the air was filled with the aroma of olives and grapes. I took a deep breath and felt the charm of the land. I rented a small Fiat and drove down a winding country road toward my destination. The road is lined with rolling vineyards, and the golden sunlight on the green vines is mesmerizingly beautiful. After a few hours of driving, I arrived in a town called Montalcino. This is where the famous Brunello wine is produced and was the main destination of my trip. I inquired about a winemaker named Marco, whose family is said to have a legendary reserve red wine. When I found Marco's winery, I was awed by the sight before me. It was an old stone building, surrounded by vines and wildflowers, like a Renaissance painting. Marco is a typical Italian with a warm heart and a big smile. His eyes lit up when I asked him about the reserve red wine. "Ah, you're talking about our family's moonlight kiss," Marco said excitedly. "That's a treasure left behind by my great-grandfather, and it's only opened on special occasions." I pleaded with Marco to let me taste this legendary wine, and he readily agreed. That night, Marco invited me to dinner at his house. In that cozy evening, I not only tasted the amazing moonlight kiss, but also felt the Italian people's love of life and the value of family. Marco's wife, Maria, hand-cooked a great dinner while their children played in the yard. Looking at this heartwarming image, I suddenly realized that this is the life I've always aspired to. After dinner, Marco and I sat on the patio and looked up at the star-filled sky. I couldn't help but confide in him about my marital woes. Marco listened quietly, patted me on the shoulder, and said, "Thomas, life is like making wine. Sometimes it takes patience, sometimes it takes decisive decisions. The most important thing is to be mindful of the beauty of each moment." His words put me in deep thought. I began to reflect on my life and think about what was really important. Over the next few days, I shadowed Marco to learn the art of winemaking and participate in the daily life of their family. I was surprised to find that I could be so relaxed and happy. The simplicity and fulfillment of walking in the vineyards every morning and enjoying dinner with Marco's family in the evening is more satisfying than I've ever felt. One day, while I was unpacking, I accidentally found an old photo. That's a picture of Olivia and I when we first got married, and we looked so young and happy. I can't help but remember the good times we had, and a tinge of bitterness floods my heart. Just then, my cell phone rang. It was an email from a family search website that said, "Dear Mr. Thomas, we have found someone related to you by blood." My heart is racing. For years I have searched for my own relatives that I have lost contact with over the years, but never had any results. Now, fate seems to have finally given me a chance. The email mentioned a lady in California named Rachel, possibly my cousin. I immediately sent an email to Rachel, briefly introducing myself and expressing my desire to meet. To my surprise, Rachel replied quickly. She told me that she had always known there was a wayward member of the family, but had never found him. She invited me to visit her in California. I explained the situation to Marco, and he completely understood and encouraged me to find my roots. Before leaving, Marco gave me a bottle of Moonlight Kiss, saying it was a blessing for my new life. With anticipation of the unknown, I embarked on a journey to California. When I arrived at Rachel's house, I was awed by the sight before me. It was an artsy villa surrounded by lush orchards. Rachel is an elegant and sensual woman whose husband, David, is a painter. They welcomed me warmly and made me feel instantly at home. Over the next few days, I immersed myself in this artistic family. Rachel told me about our family history, and David taught me to appreciate art. Together, we picked fruit in the orchard, sipped wine on the terrace, and discussed life and art. One night, we were sitting in the yard stargazing. Rachel suddenly asked me, "Thomas, have you ever thought about starting over?" I froze for a moment, then laughed bitterly. "To be honest, I've been avoiding the question." Rachel said gently, "Life has surprised you so much. Maybe it's time to be brave and face your heart." Her words put me in deep thought. Yeah, I've been running away for too long. In Tuscany, I found a love of life, In California, I found long-lost relatives. Perhaps now is the best time for me to start over. The next morning, I made a big decision. I sent Olivia an email stating that I needed some time alone to think about our relationship. Then I got down to business and decided to sell the company. With the encouragement of Rachel and David, I began to learn about art investing. I find that the process of appreciating artwork is similar to tasting fine wine. It's helped me find a new love. In this way, in the sunshine of Tuscany and the art of California, I gradually recovered my passion for life and became more determined to pursue true love and freedom. When I set foot in New York City again, I was no longer the Thomas lost in a luxury apartment. I knew that an uphill battle awaited me, but I was ready. I took a deep breath and pushed open the familiar door. Regardless of what the future holds, I know I have found my way in life. Under the Tuscan sun and under the California stars, I was redeemed and found new life. As I pushed open the familiar door, a coolness came over me. Our once cozy home is now nothing but cold. Olivia sits in the living room and looks at me with an expressionless face. "You're finally back." There was a hint of sarcasm in her tone. "I thought you had abandoned us." I take a deep breath and calmly say, "Olivia, we need to talk." The ensuing conversation was not pleasant. I told her that I had learned of her betrayal and realized that the love between us was long gone. Olivia tries to weasel her way out of it at first, but quickly gives up. She sneered, "So what? You think you can leave me? Don't forget that everything here is our joint property." I wasn't angered by her words. Instead, I felt a wave of relief. I calmly told her that I had decided to move out and that we needed some time apart. The very next day, I found a loft apartment in Brooklyn. It has a great view overlooking all of Manhattan. As I stood in front of the window, looking at the skyline in the distance, I felt as if I had been given a new lease on life. I started working on the company's business. While in Italy, I was already thinking about selling the company. Now, I found an interested buyer. It wasn't a smooth process, but eventually an agreement was reached. In the course of dealing with these matters, I met an attorney, Toby. Not only did he help me with the sale of my company, he became a good friend. When I confided in him about my marital problems, he gave me a lot of helpful advice. "Thomas," Toby said, "you need to protect yourself. I suggest you review your prenuptial agreement." I then remembered that we did sign a prenuptial agreement when we got married. I flipped out the dusty document and read it carefully, and I couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. The agreement clearly states that if one party is unfaithful, the other party is entitled to most of the property. Armed with this information, I felt more confident about facing Olivia. I know it will not be easy, but I am determined to stand firm. At the same time, I started learning about art investment. While in California, David gave me a lot of advice and introduced me to people in the industry. One of them, a gallery owner named Sarah, was so interested in my enthusiasm for learning that she offered to mentor me. Sarah is a smart and elegant woman whose love of art reminds me of Marco's passion for winemaking. Under her guidance, I gradually mastered the skills of art appreciation and began to try to make some small-scale investments. One day, Sarah took me to a private art auction. My heart suddenly beat faster when I saw a painting titled "Twilight in Tuscany." The view in that painting is exactly the view I saw at Marco's house. I didn't hesitate to raise my hand and ended up taking the painting for a substantial price. This was my first art investment done on my own and marked the beginning of a new life for me. Back at my loft in Brooklyn, I carefully hung the painting above my bed. Whenever I look at this painting, I think of my time in Tuscany, a time that gave me the courage to start over. However, life is not all smooth sailing. Olivia is clearly not willing to let go easily. She started spreading rumors in her social circle I had abandoned her and was trying to hog all the property. Some of my so-called friends began to distance themselves from me, and some even accused me publicly. I feel both angry and helpless in the face of all this. But I didn't back down because I knew that the truth would eventually come out. On Toby's advice, I decided to take legal action. We filed a petition for separation with the court under the prenuptial agreement and asked Olivia to move out of our apartment. In court, Olivia was hysterical. She tried to win the judge's sympathy by tearfully accusing me of betrayal. But when we presented evidence of her infidelity, her act immediately fell apart. In the end, the judge upheld our claim. Olivia was asked to move out of the apartment within a month, and I was given full ownership of the apartment. When I got the court's judgment, I felt a mixture of emotions. On the one hand, I was relieved that I had won. On the other hand, I was saddened by the complete breakdown of the marriage. On the day Olivia moved out, I stood at the window and watched her car fade around the corner. I know that this marks the official end of an important chapter in my life. For the next few days, I devoted myself to art investing. Under Sarah's guidance, my vision has become more and more accurate, and my investments have become more and more successful. Soon, I became a little-known and respected collector in the industry. I still see Sophia regularly. At first, she was confused and upset by my separation from Olivia, but over time, she grew to understand my decision. We are closer than ever, and she often comes to my loft apartment, where we sip wine, enjoy art, and chat. One day, Sophia brought a surprise. She pulled out a beautifully wrapped gift box containing a bottle of 1982 Lafite. "Dad," she smiled, "I remember you saying that this was your favorite wine. I thought maybe we could savor it together." I was moved beyond words. At that moment, I realized that despite the loss of a marriage, I had earned my daughter's understanding and support more than anything else. We opened that bottle together and savored it slowly. Sophia asked me curiously about wine tasting, and I patiently taught her how to appreciate a good glass of wine. "You know, Sophia," I said, "life is like this drink. It can be bitter at times, but if you're patient, eventually you'll realize how wonderful it is." Sophia nodded thoughtfully. "Let's raise our glasses together and toast to new beginnings." That night, when Sophia left, I stood on my balcony and looked out over Brooklyn at night. I thought of my time in Tuscany, of Marco and his family, of Rachel and David. I am grateful that life has given me the opportunity to start over. I took a deep breath and felt the night breeze. I know that I have a long way to go in life, but I have found the right direction. In this Brooklyn loft, I found a new me and started a new life. Tomorrow, I have to go to an art auction. Maybe I'll come across another painting that strikes my fancy. Maybe I will meet someone who will understand me and appreciate me. Either way, I'm ready for every surprise life has in store for me, because I know that the best life, like the most mellow wine, needs time to brew, patience to wait, and even more courage to taste. The divorce proceedings are finally over. When I got the final judgment, there was both relief and a touch of melancholy. That was the end of over 20 years of marriage, but I knew that it also meant the beginning of a new life. The court ultimately ruled that I received the majority of the community property in light of Olivia's infidelity. Nonetheless, I didn't feel much excitement over it. Money and material things have long been the focus of my pursuits. Instead, I'm more concerned with making my life more meaningful. I decided to put some of my money into the art market. Under Sarah's tutelage, my investment vision became more and more accurate, and I soon made a name for myself in the community. Instead of chasing expensive luxuries, I focus on pieces that really move my heart. Once, I had my eye on a piece by an unknown young painter at a small auction. It was an oil painting depicting the Tuscan countryside with sunlight gently spilling over the vineyards, reminding me of my days at Marco's house. I didn't hesitate to photograph the painting, and then even took the initiative to contact the young painter and become his patron. The other portion of the funds I used to support my own wine collecting business. I carved out a room in my Brooklyn loft that is dedicated to storing a collection of fine wines. Every time I open that door and smell the aroma of oak barrels and grapes, it's incredibly relaxing and satisfying. I started hosting small wine tastings on a regular basis, inviting some like-minded friends to share a glass of wine. I met many interesting people at these gatherings, not the least of which were artists, writers, and foodies. We talked about life and shared each other's stories, and I was overwhelmed by this spiritual exchange. One day, Sarah brings a friend named Emma. Emma is a food critic with an eye for wine. Her eyes lit up when she tasted my treasured bottle of Moonlight Kiss. "Thomas, this wine is fantastic," Emma exclaimed heartily. It reminds me of a Tuscan summer. I looked at her in surprise. You've been to Tuscany? Emma nodded and began to talk about her experiences in Italy. We hated each other so much that we lost track of time talking. After that day, we began to see each other frequently, and gradually I found myself falling in love again. Emma not only appreciates fine wine and art, but more importantly, she understands me and supports my career. She often accompanies me to art auctions and gives me valuable advice. Together, we have also planned several successful charity auctions, donating a portion of the proceeds to foundations that support young artists. Meanwhile, my daughters and I have grown closer. Sophia has graduated from college and started working at an advertising agency. Every weekend, she would come to my loft and we would sip wine, enjoy art, and share each other's lives. One day, Sophia brings her sister Ava. Ava is 2 years younger than Sophia and is attending college. At first, Ava was a little distant from me, probably because she was confused and upset by the divorce. But over time, Ava opened up. She had a keen interest in art and often pestered me with stories about various paintings. Watching my 2 daughters laugh and smile in my loft is incredibly gratifying. One day, out of the blue, Ava asked me, "Daddy, do you regret it?" I froze. Regret what? Regret divorcing my mom and changing my life. I looked out the window at the view of Brooklyn, thought for a moment, then smiled and said, "No, I don't regret it. Life is like a bottle of aged wine that takes time to savor. I'm finally getting a taste of what it really tastes like now." Ava nodded thoughtfully. At that moment, I felt like the barrier between us was completely gone. Day by day, my life is becoming more and more fulfilling. I no longer seek material luxuries, but focus more on spiritual abundance. I spend a lot of time with Emma visiting galleries, wine tasting, traveling, and enjoying a simple, happy life. One day, Emma suggested that we go on vacation to Tuscany together. When I set foot on this land again, an unspeakable emotion welled up in my heart. I took Emma to visit the Marco family. Marco warmly gave me a big hug when he saw me. "Thomas, my friend," he said happily, "it seems you have found your happiness." We had a wonderful time at Marco's vineyard. Emma and Maria hit it off right away and became fast friends. In the evenings, we sat on the patio, sipping Marco's new brew and watching the sky fill with stars. "You know," Marco said suddenly, "I've been keeping a special bottle of wine, just waiting for the day you come back." He pulled out a bottle of wine and I instantly recognized the familiar label, Moonshine Kisses. "I saved this just for you," Marco said with a smile, "to celebrate you finding your true self." I was moved beyond words. When we tasted this bottle of treasured wine together, I felt that my life was just like this wine, which had been precipitated and finally blossomed into the most beautiful fragrance. Upon returning to New York, I decided that I wanted to remember this experience forever. I commissioned the young artist to create a large oil painting of a Tuscan vineyard with Marco, and me raising a glass of wine at sunset. The painting was hung in the living room of my loft and became the most striking decoration. Life inevitably still has some ups and downs. Sometimes I get messages from Olivia, who still seems to be trying to interfere with my life. But these little nuisances can no longer shake my inner peace. I've learned to deal with these situations with grace and not be haunted by the haze of the past. For my 50th birthday, Emma, Sophia, and Ava planned a surprise party for me. They invited all my friends, including Rachel and David, who traveled all the way from California. Looking at the group of people in front of me who care about me and support me, I feel incredibly blessed. At the party, Sophia brought out a bottle of wine. "Daddy," she smiled, "I picked this out with Ava. We wanted to give you a special gift." I took the bottle and was surprised to find it was a 1961 Latour. I remember tasting this wine alone many years ago when I was down and out, and now it's being given to me as a gift by my favorite people. I was so moved I could hardly speak. I looked around and saw Emma's gentle smile, my daughter's expectant eyes, and my friend's sincere wishes. In this moment, I finally realized that true freedom comes from inner strength and redemption of the self. I raised my glass and thanked everyone there. I said, "Life is like a bottle of wine. It takes time to brew and courage to savor. Thank you to each and every one of you who have made my life so wonderful. Later that night, after the party, I stood alone on a balcony overlooking Brooklyn at night. I think of the lost self I once was in an Upper East Side mansion, the redemption I gained under the Tuscan sun, and the rebirth I experienced in this Brooklyn loft. I inhaled deeply and smelled the faint scent of wine in the air. I know that my life is like this mellow wine, which, after years of precipitation, finally gives off a charming fragrance. And that, in a nutshell, is the freedom and happiness I've been looking for. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's story. If you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe if you haven't already. If you have a story to share about your own or someone else's experience, please feel free to contact me. Take care.